All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's live event. So today, on the show, we are going to meet our fair housing panel. And before that, we'll get a very brief update from our partner, the Seattle Public Library, and learn about COVID-19 and other resources in your community. First, before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. We want to invite you to please visit duwamishtribe.org to learn more about the Duwamish, people of the inside, who are still here, and find out how you can get involved. Thank you very much. So, moving right along to our first presenter, who is Robin Russo, and hopefully I am pronouncing your name correctly. We're new colleagues in this space. Robin is the assistant managing librarian for lifelong access at the Seattle Public Library. We have partnered with the Seattle Public Library for the past couple of years on these virtual events, hoping to move it into the in-person arena at the Central Library and with possibility of broadcasting elsewhere. But for now, we're virtual. And Robin, so great to have you and to have your partnership. Why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Lenny. I'm Robin Rosu, and I'm with the Seattle Public Library. Exciting times at the library. We've got a new chief librarian named Tom Fay. We're really excited to have a new leader on board. Yesterday, we expanded open hours at many of our locations, and for the first time since the pandemic, we opened the spiral in the Central Library. So floors 6 through 10 of the Central Library will now be open on Wednesdays, which is great news for nonfiction readers and researchers. We are also offering free in-person tax help at the Central Library in partnership with United Way. More information about all of these and many more wonderful things at the library can be found on our website at www.spl.org and by calling the library at 206-386-4636. That's it. Thanks, Lenny.
All right. Thank you so much for this update, Robin. We really appreciate it. And with that, we will get moving towards our main event. But before that, just a few notes to share with you about some resources in your communities. What I have on the screen right now is kingcounty.gov. If you go, just type in kingcounty.gov and click on COVID-19 resources. Why are we talking about COVID? This is 2 years into when we first started doing virtual events. So what our public health experts are telling us that COVID is not over. Cases are not high, but they are on a slight uptick with the new Omicron variant. As you know, starting, even at City of Seattle offices, masks are no longer required starting next week. But the public health officials do advise that in high risk settings, we still continue to protect, especially others who cannot be protected by vaccines. And speaking of vaccines, if you are looking to be vaccinated or get a booster, that is something that is certainly recommended. The way to sign up online is to in King County is to go to yourcovidvaccine.kingcounty.gov, and we'll put that in the chat as well. You can also call the main hotline for Washington State. It's 1-800-525-0127. Or if you wanted to find out from the federal level, you can text to a short number 438-829 with your zip code, and you'll get a response, within a minute with locations where vaccines are available. Please share this with folks that you think they can use it. And with any questions about aging and disability, you are encouraged to call Community Living Connections. It's a network of organizations in communities throughout Seattle and King County that are contracted with the city of Seattle and King County, and they can help with questions such as rent, assistance, plumbing questions, food and meals. Their 1-800 number for their call line is 844-348-5464, or you can go to communitylivingconnections.org and see the list of locations on the map and find something that's in your area. It's a, no wrong door approach, to where if you came into an organization and you were looking for a service they didn't have, they would refer you to another organization that does offer that service. Thank you very much for also sharing that with folks that you think can benefit from it. So with that, I would like to invite to our stage Triana Holiday. Triana is gracefully agreed to help us host this panel. I know I follow and admire Triana's work on Converge Media, along with Omari Salisbury, who was a guest here on this show a little over a year ago. So I'm going to introduce Triana and then turn it over to her for the panel. So as a true Seattleite, Triana has watched her city change in many ways. From the age of 9, her deepest passion was in the creative field, which flourished at Garfield High. She took that passion to Howard University, where she studied theater management in her first year of college. Through studying abroad multiple times at the University of Washington, Tacoma, gaining her degree in communications and urban studies, and being displaced by gentrification, she is now fueled to tell her neighborhood stories through film and education. She found ways to work on the solutions as an ambassador with Africatown Community Land Trust, TV show host and producer with Converge Media, and media director for King County Equity Now. As a steward of community with a passion for storytelling, she brings her ideals to life and strives to help others do the same. It's all about storytelling, and we are looking forward to your story and the panel stories, Triana. Welcome to the show, and please take it away.
Absolutely, Lenny. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you all for joining us today. This is going to be a really great discussion with our amazing panelists. And first, we want to start by saying that we have panelists that span the spectrum. So we have some folks from community, some folks from the city. So we want you to be mindful that you may hear a wide variety of perspectives. Not all of them will be coming from the city of Seattle. So be mindful of that. Also, we want to do a bit of grounding here in terms of some of the context for what brought us here today. And we're talking about Fair Housing Month. It commemorates the 1968 passage of the Fair Housing Act, which was passed after many years of advocacy and prohibits discrimination concerning the sale, rental, and financing of housing based on race, religion, national origin, sex, disability, and family status. You can learn more there if you look up HUD Fair Housing history as well. There's an exemption from the familial status discrimination ban if housing is intended specifically for older people, usually age 55 and above. Fair Housing Act is important to many groups of people, including older adults as well. And the U.S. population is aging. We have a couple data points here. In 2040, the number of older adults is predicted to double from the year 2000. And the number of older adults in Puget Sound region is projected to grow 85% from 2020 to 2050. And 12.5% of Seattle residents are age 65 and above. This is up 2% from 2010. So many people experience disabilities as they age. About 50% of people over 75 have some form of disability. The Fair Housing protects against discrimination based on disability as well. Discrimination and systemic inequities compound over time. Older adults of color, those from the global majority, face bigger challenges to staying in their homes as they age. So we want to just open that up and make sure you guys understand that. You guys can check out the first 5 minutes of a video, Seattle on the Line, examining the history and contemporary impact of redlining. Um, that's one way that we could just open it. But I wanted to just give you guys those points and let you know some of that data and some of that information before we introduce our panel. And now I have the esteemed honor of introducing these amazing panelists that we have before us. We have some really great questions, so we want to get right into it for the panel here. Uh, we have Edna Diagre, a community advocate and dance teacher for Seattle Central College. Edna is a native of Chicago, Illinois. She began her early dance education studying Catherine Dunham's philosophy and technique. Her 35 years of community service includes developing health and dance programs for public schools, colleges, community-based projects, and special populations. In 1974, she opened her own dance studio, Awajo Performing Arts, in the Wallingford neighborhood of Seattle. This mission brought people from diverse backgrounds together to experience dance and health as a living expression of shared culture and histories. In 2007, she closed her studio but continues her mission teaching dance as a healthy prescription and lifestyle for the aging population. Edna is currently teaching the art of breathing and healthy movements at Seattle Central College. The atmosphere in her classes is open, social, and oriented around moving together in friendship. So I welcome to the stage Edna Diagre. Up next, our panelist, Joaquin K. Joaquin Garrett, is the president and CEO of Africatown Community Land Trust. He's a third generation community builder, social entrepreneur, and current president and CEO of ACLT in Seattle, Washington. Joaquin designs programs and initiatives that catalyze, mobilize, and activate communities for sustainable social impact. He has been a co-catalyst for numerous ventures, including the Africatown Seattle Community Development Initiative, Liberty Bank Building, Umoja Peace Center, Hack the CD, Black Dot, Umoja Fest, and Africatown Center for Education and Innovation. Joaquin was an inaugural member of the Seattle Music Commission and a past fellow with the national advocacy organization Green for All. He has been honored with the Center for Ethical Leadership Legacy Leadership Award by Tabor 100's Crystal Eagle Award and was recognized as Seattle Magazine's Most Influential People of 2019 and Seattle Times 13 Most Influential People of the Decade. Welcome, K. Joaquin Garrett. Up next, we have Rico Kinidongo. He's the acting director of Seattle Office of Planning and Community Development. Rico was a mayoral appointee to the historic Seattle Council for 6 years, was a founding member of the National Organization of Minority Architects Northwest Chapter, and Rico sat on the AIA Plus 2030 National Steering Committee, helping 24 cities nationally provide curriculum to meet the 2030 challenge. Rico works with organizations to positively influence communities through design. He was the chair of Pike Place Market Preservation and Development Authority Council, was a Downtown Seattle Association board member, and was AIA Seattle president in 2012 to 2013. Rico's first TED Talk is called Transforming Communities Through Architecture. In 2021, he was given Commercial Real Estate Leadership Award as a neighborhood champion by the Puget Sound Business Journal. He was recognized by AIA as a citizen architect in 2020 and is a state representative on the AIA Strategic Council. Let's welcome Rico Kinidongo. And last but definitely not least is Maeko Winkler Chen, Director of Seattle Office of Housing. In this role, Maeko leads the Office of Housing in its efforts to create and preserve affordable rental and home ownership opportunities, craft policies and programs that advance racial equity and housing justice, and support low-income homeowners so they can afford to live safely and comfortably in their homes. Before coming to the Office of Housing, Michael worked at the Seattle Chinatown International District Preservation and Development Authority, SCIPTA, where she served as executive director since 2009. Under her leadership, SCIPTA advocated for those who live, work, and frequent the Chinatown International District, helping create hundreds of new affordable homes throughout the neighborhood. Maika was a founding member of Puget Sound Regional Council's HUD Sustainable Communities Regional Equity Network, co-chaired the Urban Land Institute's Center for Sustainable Leadership, and was a UW Runstad Center for Real Estate Studies affiliate fellow. She has served on the board of the Housing Development Consortium of Seattle-King County. In 2020, she was the recipient of the 2020 Women of Valor Award from Senator Maria Cantwell, and in 2021 was named one of the 100 most influential people in Seattle by the Seattle Met. Wow, we have an amazing panel right here before you all. Thank you all panelists for joining us today. We're going to start off with some questions that we have designed for you all to answer, and then as was said earlier, we want to make sure that you out there in the audience are also putting your questions in the chat so we can ensure that we're able to have some space to answer some of your questions once we get through these curated questions. All right, I'm going to start here with one of the first questions we have. And so we want to just kind of ground ourselves and learn about the focus of each one of you as panelists, what organizations you represent. We kind of talked about it in your bio, but you can expand on that, how you accomplish your mission, and how does all of it work together when you're talking about your mission, the work you do with your organization, and how you focus on housing justice. I'll start with you, Ms. Edna. Unmute, I think.
Oh, unmute. I'm sorry.
We can hear you now.
Oh, you can hear me? Okay. Okay. Thanks for inviting me. And I'm glad to be here. I hope I can share some information with you about my journey. I hope I can speak and listen and learn because it's been a journey for me. I've been teaching health and wellness programs for over 45 years in Seattle and surrounding areas. I believe the benefits of health and wellness and dance for lifetime wellness. Today, I want to create a social culture that values aging. The only discrimination that is still acceptable in our culture is ageism, and that's by Bill Mager. The history of my service is a summation of who I am. I am at the age of 79. I do not know how long I'm going to live, but I have control over how I choose to live. Aging healthy, being independent is my goal. I expect to be around many more decades, even as I become increasingly aware of my mind and my body limitations. I intend to stay healthy and moving creative as much as possible. I don't see myself retiring mentally, physically, or socially. I will always work towards a clear vision and purpose. I strive to understand my life and the life of those around me. And I appreciate the privilege of teaching while being an active aging person. Of course, this enables me to continue learning and adapting to my limitations that comes with growing older. I have met many friends who do not want to live I have met many friends who do not want to be the burden of the other people. They want to live independently, and so they choose to accept things they cannot change as a blessing. There is a growing realization that everyone does not age the same. The difference in environment, diets, and community activities play a major influence in what is brought to older age. I've since been teaching over 45 years, and I have a birthday coming up, and I'll be 80. And again, when people think of 60s, 70s, and 80s, they think of, wow, that's really older, or they refuse to tell the age altogether. No one asked me my age, so I just assumed that everybody sort of knew. Okay, I strive to better understand my life and those of those around me. I appreciate the privilege of teaching while being, again, an active aging person. I came to Seattle in 1974. There was this Boeing had a burst. It was a lot of people moving out because of the layoff at Boeing. So my family and I moved here in 74. And the labor force at that time was like 62,000, 18,000, 62,000 people were laid off. So there was a lot of housing. We didn't know much about the Seattle area, being from Chicago and, and so forth. But when we arrived, we had a choice of really low cost housing, rental, and very little at that point discrimination that we encountered. But we still moved north. We moved out in Mount Lake Terrace. I felt like at this point, we didn't know Seattle that well, but I decided to go take a lot of time to get to know Seattle. So I began to start coming into Seattle for activities. And in the central area, the central area is one of the most interesting areas for me at this time, because there was a lot of growth and expansions for people like me. There's a lot of housing, and I was quite well accepted. We didn't know much about the Seattle area. About 70 areas, 475, and expansions for and I was quite well accepted. My whole emphasis was on healthy wellness, 475 expansions. At that time, I still wanted to do the dancing and be a part of the Artists of Seattle. So Model Cities program was at that time. And it was called Central Area Motivation Program. And I went there, and there was a lot of activities that I learned about Seattle, and I wanted to get involved. So I immediately started going to meetings, started getting familiar with people in Seattle. And what I want to go into now is I'm aging in Seattle, in the central area. And I never thought I would be living in Seattle this long. I thought I would be on the road again, going back to California or Chicago. And so when I think about aging in poverty in Seattle, I just realized that that's a possibility. So over the next 10 years, my whole thing, I moved around in Seattle area. And since it's been such a journey, it's hard to put it in perspective, so I hope you can follow me a little bit. When I first moved from Mount Lake Terrace into Seattle, it was, like I say, it was in the 80s. I did open a dance studio, which was in the Wallingford district, and I was affiliated with UW. I got on staff there as a dance instructor. I was able to be the first one who could teach Afro, Latin, jazz, and it was very difficult for me because I didn't have a format, and I was teaching 300, 400 level students. So not only was I teaching dance, I was teaching the culture, I was teaching the tradition, and I had to grade students, and it was very, very challenging. And there was quite a bit of questions about my background in education at that time. So Owajo went well. I closed Owajo in 2007, which was a studio that was very diverse, brought many different people from many different backgrounds to share through the dance. And by 2007, I was getting older, and there was a lot of problems in terms of running a small business in the central area. And I noticed that as far as grants and a lot of support was not there for me, not in terms of the community itself, but a lot of the fundings for small organizations, nonprofit organizations. So I began to think in terms of maybe I can do better without having this business over my head. You know, there was quite a bit of expense because I had 3 movements in the central area in my commercial spaces. In the meantime, I had about 2 or 3 different apartments until I ended up buying a condominium in the central area on 23rd and Jackson. I'm between 23rd and Jackson and Yesler. I moved there in 2001, and I've been here ever since. And I've seen so much changes. And what I'm seeing now, and I love it, it's almost like Sam Cooke says, a change gonna come. And I'm seeing that change, and I'm living it. And I'm so glad that it is changing. And I see a lot in terms of the youth, the younger generation, because I feel like if we all could work as a team and the resources can get to us, it would be much better. I'm always complaining about resources and outreach, but I'm beginning to see more of that now. And as we age, as individuals, we are especially vulnerable in terms of economics, in terms of our instability, especially our physical health, cognitive abilities, and social networking declines. We lose a lot of friendship. We go into sort of a social isolation. And if you have a different language, sometimes it's even more so to connect with a social kind of gathering. And if you do, you usually stay in a little village, a little circle, and it gets smaller and smaller because most of us, as we age into 80s and 90s, we transition. And I found out that older women are most likely to live in poverty than men as a result of wage discrimination and having to take time out for the workforce or for caregiving. Older women are and older men are an important part of our community, but they are struggling to stay out of poverty. Recently, I've had time to look around in my own neighborhood, which is the central area, very central. And I'm always, when new business open around here, I go and introduce myself. And I use aging and disability as a guest membership of that. And I always ask them, what are the advantages and the privileges for aging people here? Do you have anything special for us? And usually they tell me, yes, we do. And so I usually go back and check. And there hasn't been that much. It's very little. And I don't want to call out the names of the businesses or the places that is open. But then again, these are, I'm sort of glad to see that there is a comeback in our community. Things are changing, but it's still a lot more to go. But I'm looking at Midtown, I'm looking at Jackson Apartments, and I'm always going and visiting these places because I have time now. And I'm looking at them because, again, I love them. And I'm always looking out for what's there for me and my healthy people.
That's amazing, Miss Edna. Thank you so much.
Let me know about time. I have a few more things to say. One of the things I would like to say is when you go to the meetings, there's not a lot of resources for some of the meetings that I've gone to, and I've always complained about the kind of language that people use at these meetings, and it's always a certain personal agenda. We need to open up a little bit more and be especially aware of older people, aging people. The response to the homelessness crisis has come from the government, the businesses, the services, the providers, philanthropists, and advocates across the region. Over the last decade, hundreds of millions of dollars have been invested to address the problems, but a lack of coordination among governments and other stakeholders have limited the effectiveness, I get the words right, the effectiveness of those investments. The response to homelessness has been divided among many agencies and government structures, with none having authorities to establish clear priorities, reduce duplication, and align reporting measures across the board. Again, that addressed my call out to much more information that makes this relatable. Open the gate a little bit wider so other people can come in who can be able to understand what is available for them, what resources, lay off so many acronyms because that's very difficult. Even in the Congress, I know the Congress people, older people always spell out the words rather than using all acronyms. So that's another thing to be aware of. And again, health and housing goes together. I'm one who's dealing with a chronic disease, and I am healthy at this point because I have taken step by step towards being an African American woman of this age who have been into healthcare many years. And I'm telling most of you, really focus on as housing and health at the same time. It is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Edna. Great opening and grounding here. Appreciate your perspective. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Rico and just kind of give us a bit of background about how your work is really connected to fair housing, and how it works together, maybe with your team and the city, to do that work.
All right, hopefully you can hear me okay. So I'm a recovering architect. I was a practicing architect for 27 years. A lot of that work, a large majority of that work has been in the Central District. So from Casey Family Program, the Casey Family Program building that's at 23rd and Union, worked with Ezel's Chicken on a development vision for their block across the street from Garfield. My mother went to Garfield High School. I actually worked with Central Area Motivational Program back in the day in their old facility. The Northwest African American Museum, the light rail station at Massachusetts and I-90 that is now in place. Transitional housing for First Place Schools, and most recently the Midtown Square development, again at 23rd and Union, all of which provides me some just grounding and sense of place with regards to like the rich fabric that is the Central District. I also, in working with Donald King for many years, over 17 years actually, worked with a number of Black churches regarding visioning how they could leverage their properties and do more for the communities that they were serving. That has, and now that I'm with the city, so Office of Planning and Community Development, I've been able to work with our staff. So we have over 40 staff. We are working in a number of different areas. So kind of long-range planning. One of the major efforts we're doing over the course of the next 3 years is revisiting and updating and rewriting our comprehensive plan for the city. So the last time this was done was 2016. We've seen a huge amount of growth since then. If we look at what happens over the next 10 years, we will likely hit 1 million people in the city of Seattle. So we need to go back, and we're required as a city through the Growth Management Act to be as predictive as possible regarding where the city will grow, how it grows, and providing legislation and zoning planning that targets that growth. We're just starting a 3-year effort, which will include a large community engagement component to hear from community what we are doing well, what we are not doing well. We know that as the city has grown, that we have not generated the number of new housing units to support that growth, and that's something that we as a city need to work on. To that end, we're creating a housing, we call it a sub-cabinet, but a group of directors at the city that will be looking at how do we remove barriers to creating new housing, and that can be on existing sites, that can be existing buildings, that can be new buildings, and that we're providing housing at all the different scales. So whether it is like homeless temporary housing, tiny homes, transitional housing, SROs, which is single resident occupancy, traditional rental housing, affordable housing, market rate housing, lease to own opportunities, public-private partnerships, like infill housing, townhouses, triplexes, quads, 4 units, 6 units. We need to look at the full complement, because what we know is if we're going to provide opportunities for people to buy their first home, opportunities for aging families to stay in place and build a accessory dwelling unit or a detached accessory dwelling unit that provides them income so that supports their mortgage and allows them to stay in the community. We need to be working with the private sector, the public sector, the not-for-profit community to ensure that we can provide the full range of housing types and housing options, workforce housing, all of the things, because we have a very diverse community with very diverse needs. There's a lot of moving parts there, and so part of it's the long-range planning work that we do, that we will be doing related to the comprehensive plan, One Seattle, the One Seattle plan. On the other hand, very much like on the ground, we have our Equitable Development Initiative, working with community-based organizations like Africatown, to put development dollars into the community for community-led, community-based projects that complement or are a part of the housing developments that are in progress right now. A lot more to talk about there. I'm really honored to be here today. So thank you all.
Thanks so much, Rico, for that grounding there of your work. I'll come to you, Maiko, in terms of the Office of Housing, how it's grounded through fair housing principles and how your work all comes together with the topic we're sharing today.
Thanks, everyone. I'm really honored to be on this panel. I brought my cup of coffee for Civic Coffee because it's always about the coffee this time of day. Just to let you all know, this is day 14 for me at the City of Seattle, so this is all new. Previous to working at the City of Seattle, I worked for 17 years for a community development organization in the Chinatown International District, which for me is it's a very grounding place. That is where I have the house that I live on in Beacon Hill, which is my home, but my heart home is the ID. It's where I get the food that I need, because QFC in the Rainier Valley doesn't sell some of the funky food that I eat. It is the place where I get to celebrate my culture and where I'm not mistaken as other. I'm who I can truly be in that neighborhood. So it's a little hard for me to be in this conversation because part of me goes back to that, and part of me is in my Office of Housing role. And I'm sure that the communication staff for the Office of Housing role who is watching me right now are probably freaking out because I have their talking points, but there's a little bit of me that always goes off topic, as some of those of you who know me know about that. So the Office of Housing really supports the creation and preservation of affordable housing as something that is a basic infrastructure need in Seattle, right? And our programs and initiatives address displacement, as well as increase opportunities for people of all incomes to live throughout the city of Seattle. And I think it's throughout the city that is an important component of fair housing. When we think back to 1968 and that the city was redlined, meaning that certain people could only live in certain parts of the city, right? And that is kind of the mindset of fair housing, that people could go and have opportunity wherever they wanted to. So you had a choice. And so the Office of Housing really helps fund projects throughout the city. We make investments every year to build and preserve affordable housing throughout Seattle. We've created and preserved both rental and permanently affordable home ownership. And specifically, that's included over 1,000 units that specifically serve older adults. But I would say in my past life at the Chinatown ID, 25% of our affordable housing units that were non-senior designated also held seniors, because seniors, there's more seniors living in that neighborhood than affordable housing that's specifically designated for seniors. And sometimes seniors wanted to live with their family, right? An extended multi-generational household. So instead of living in a senior specific building, they chose to live in a 3-bedroom unit with their family members. It's providing different choices and different options for people. We only get to make those investments because of the generosity of voter approved Seattle Housing Levy, which is how the City of Seattle residents have voted to put money aside to help build affordable housing for our community. It's also, the affordable housing is funded through other programs like mandatory housing affordability, which then requires developers of housing to have a certain number of units that are made available for households at different incomes. So it's not just all market rate, there's a level of that there. The Jumpstart program, which is a tax on businesses, and knowing that businesses, certain types of businesses that have higher income employees should put some of that money, should pay towards the preservation of affordable housing and the development of affordable housing here in the city, and other local and state and federal funds. So there's some state funds. We try to pull those into Seattle to help build more housing. We also work to make sure low-income homeowners are not displaced by rising costs. So we have a home repair and a healthy home program, which makes sure homes are safe, healthy, and sustainable. So that could be what's oftentimes called weatherization. So it's putting in new windows, making sure that the home systems, the heating systems work well, and those types of programs. And those have been around for a long time. A couple of projects that we have invested in specifically related to seniors in the central area is Mount Zion has a senior housing project out on 19th, and it allows Mount Zion to maintain their presence in the central area, as well as use some of their space, which is a parking lot, to help create some affordable housing and to keep seniors really tied into the community in a place that makes them feel comfortable and safe and supported. And I think we've passed some legislation in the past year to really look at how do we look at allowing those types of opportunities to not just be a one-off opportunity, to have all the churches think about that parking lot that they may have. Do they want to do something with that parking lot? We have funded Africatown Community Land Trust, and I see that White King's going to be probably speaking next, and just working a little bit on Africatown Plaza and the acquisition of the former K Road Northwest site in the central area. That way they can further develop for the needs of their community. I think the work that we do with the Office of Planning and Community Development kind of gets to something that Edna mentioned, which is kind of how government tends to work in these silos. And as I said, it's day 14 for me, and I'm still trying to figure out what it is like to work in the city. The work that we would do with Rico is really, really important. Rico and his team over at the Office of Planning and Community Development, as they look uh, as they look at the future and how we should be doing the work that we do. Um, I know that Rico is really thinking about the affordable housing needs, and he talked about all the different types of housing. For us, it's also about the income levels and what needs to be around those housing units to help make it the healthy place that Edna was talking about earlier. And so, really forward to working with Rico on that work going forward, but also with the other departments of the city, because even though I'm the Office of Housing, when some of the things that get mentioned about how does, I think there were questions in the chat about how does the new eviction moratorium being lifted really impact community? That I don't see so much in my work, which seems really strange because that information is collected in a different department. The rental registration work that got mentioned in the chat, that gets collected in a different department. And so it is really about how do we think about housing as a whole in the city and housing for the communities that we want to be here. And I think fair housing is important because it causes us to think about where people live and what are the different categories. I just cannot imagine living in a neighborhood without having senior citizens around. Probably also because I'm becoming a senior citizen. I'm kind of aging in that way myself, as we are all, it's inevitable, right? But I think about what my own family needs and requires and how housing near certain amenities is really, really important for them to maintain the life that they've chosen to leave here or to live here. So that I'll turn it over to Triana. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. And day 14, wow, glad you could join us for this panel. New role. Of course, coming over to you, Kate Joaquin Garrett of Africatown, to give us some grounding in how your work is resounding around fair housing. You're muted.
Yes, good afternoon or good morning to everyone, almost afternoon. Thank you, Triana, and to the team that has put this event together. I appreciate the opportunity to be here to learn and share a little bit about my own and our work and experience. I really want to acknowledge and give gratitude for our community elder, Edna, for lifting up what she lifted up around care for our seniors that are aging. It said that a society is measured by how they treat their elders and how they treat their children. And I think, there's a lot of opportunity for pause to really consider that. There's an East African, a Maasai, Kenya, saying that greeting, which is how are the children, right? And that's definitely a great measurement, but I think, we could all benefit by adding to that, how are the elders, when we think about the well-being of our, communities, our families, and ourself. And there's definitely space for much greater consideration because this is not a society that I think really values, elders. And as a son of, aging parent, even for me, I'm, really embracing the ways in which I must grow and adjust to, support, this stage of my parent journey. So I appreciate that. And it really, does, speak to our work with Africatown. Myself, I'm a third generation, community builder from the Central District. My grandparents came here in the World War II era and grew here and have been observed and experienced a lot in this community. Africatown, my work with Africatown, I think is really around helping to build Seattle, a future Seattle that is a world-class city that is inclusive of the communities of the world that have made the city, with a specific focus for our work on working to make ways for the Black community that has called the Central District in Seattle home for nearly 140 years to be able to grow and thrive in place. Africatown Community Land Trust specifically as part of the larger Africatown, which is an asset, initiative, which is an asset-based community development initiative focused on maintaining and holding and developing space where the beauty, the brilliance, and the best of the Black experience and African diaspora can be honored and can grow and thrive and flourish to the benefit of all. And Africatown Community Land Trust specifically acquires, develops, and stewards land to preserve and empower the Black diaspora community in Greater Seattle. Over the past 6 years, since being founded in 2016, Africatown Community Land Trust has emerged as and been a leading voice for policy change, resulting in hundreds of millions of dollars, not only in the Central District focused on the Black community, but across the city, including Chinatown International District, Southeast Seattle, to support, communities that are facing displacement. Our specific projects have included, innovative new developments such as the Liberty Bank building with community partners such as Black Community Impact Alliance, Burt Bar Place, as well as Community Roots Housing as the affordable housing development partner. As mentioned, the acquisition of land at the former Midtown Center to become the Africatown Plaza, which just had a groundbreaking celebration last month. And looking forward to that construction, which will be 126 units of affordable housing, including a focus on families, which is often not acknowledged in the affordable housing equation in Seattle, or just the housing equation in Seattle, period. Building on, again, Liberty Bank building, which is 115 units of affordable housing with commercial space on the bottom, focused on allowing Black community members, Black businesses to be able to stay or come back to the community where they're rooted. Also, the recent acquisition of the former Cairo site on 16th and Yesler, which was going to be nearly 300 units of market rate housing, and we were able a lot of community advocacy work and partnerships with the city, the state, and others to acquire that land, and currently have repurposed the building in less than 60 days to be a new community home, culturally trauma-informed, culturally responsive, enhanced shelter program focused on reducing the overrepresentation of Black men in the houseless population. The future will be developed as, again, affordable housing to honor not just the Black community experience, but this is, that site was served the Japanese community and Pan Asian elders for nearly 40 years or over 40 years, as well as, indigenous communities that have been displaced from land here. So thinking of how innovative development can kind of show this vision of Seattle of being, again, a world-class city that includes communities that have been here and made it. Also partnering with Community Passageways and Creative Justice to bring forth the Youth Achievement Center to focus on bringing young people out of the school to prison pipeline by giving them housing and co-locating supportive, culturally responsive resources on site. Obtaining site control of the former Fire Station 6 on 23rd and Yesler, which is currently being renovated to be the William Gross Center for Cultural Innovation to connect many of our community members' genius and brilliance and innovative spirit that has always been a part of the Central District with the broader economic opportunities in the knowledge-based industry sectors, which we have largely not been equitably participating in. And also supporting affordable home ownership through partnerships with Homestead Community Land Trust and acquiring land to develop, again, for affordable home ownership. When we think about the ecosystem of housing needs, I think that Rico alluded to, there's a life cycle of needs, right? We're born in a house or come home to a house. There's needs, when we're at that level to the time when we first leave our parents' home possibly and have our own first place, and then we have a family and need a home, and thinking about building equity until, you transition, you may become an empty nester and may need to downsize. What is the space, for all of that to happen within a community where so much of your support system is. We know that through the way the displacement and gentrification has decimated our community. It's not just there's a lot of trauma that has been attached to that, and displacement, and we're really still figuring out what the impacts of that have been, right? Not just in many different ways, right? Again, just your social support network being dispersed, 30 minutes apart from family members and things of that nature, right? Where previously we had cousins and grandparents and, all of this within walking distance, which makes it much easier to be supportive and to have a greater sense of resilience. And so, our overall vision, I think, for heritage-rich, inclusive, equitable development in the city of Seattle has those values have been embraced by many, neighborhood stakeholders, officials, and we have even been able to produce some evidence that another path is possible, because in many times people would just refer to gentrification as if it was some type of natural phenomenon and not actually the result of specific choices, right, that produce specific outcomes. And if different choices are made, then different outcomes can be brought about, And so giving some actual brick and mortar examples that really make the rhetoric of shared prosperity, inclusive, the liberal, the progressive things that Seattle gets known for in terms of making those real. But we know that to really achieve, this vision of a city, there's going to need to be much more bold, investments to take things to scale. And, that is, what our work is a part of, alongside many others. And our current, focus is on really addressing the issues around capital that we run into when it's time to acquire, when it's time to develop, when it's time to maximize participation of Black contractors, when it's time to bring Black businesses into new commercial spaces, and the tenant improvement costs every step of the way. Access to capital is a primary barrier, and so our focus is on building seeding $1 billion Build Africa Town anti-displacement fund to address these barriers so that we can really scale the impact now that we have some proofs of concept. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Great grounding. And of course, this is only until noon. So we got to kind of go lightning round for some of these questions that we have curated. We have some amazing questions in the chat. And I think that one of the questions in the chat will also help to provide a bit more grounding here before we kind of get into some of these curated questions. Really quickly, I'll pass this over to Rico. If you can help just us understand what is affordable housing. Somebody's saying, right now Seattle looks like it's just a place for the wealthy. Please define what affordable housing is, Rico, for us really quickly.
I will do my best, Micah. You may want to kick me under the virtual table here also. So I think there's the traditional definition of affordable housing, which is subsidized housing, right? And that is the business that Office of Housing is largely responsible for the city, which is subsidized housing, and that there's federal subsidy dollars that are part of the development of that housing complement, plus subsidizing of rents, whether it's and Micah, you really should jump in on this one. Whether it's 60% AMI or 80% AMI, it's that range. But I think, and I'll let Michael speak more to that. However, I think when we're talking about what is affordable housing in a larger sense, what we really should be talking about is how can an average person afford to live in this city? And that's a conversation about affording monthly rent in a place that is a conversation about finding a pathway to first-time home ownership. That's about as a family of, whether it's a family of 2, a family of 4, a family of 6, whatever the size of your family or whatever defines family for you, like being able to have the money that you put toward where you live also be contributing toward generational wealth for both yourself, your family, and your future, the future of like your own family, and then also our community. And I think that's where, you know, we know that Seattle has just become less and less affordable, and there's a bunch of work to do, and that's why I talk about all the different types of housing. That's why we've got to look at that full complement, because different people have very different needs in order to get to that affordable housing that is a part of what they need specifically.
Absolutely. Michael.
Yeah, what I would add to it. Yeah, I would say so. Housing is considered affordable for an individual if you pay 30% of your gross income. I don't know why it's 30%. This was defined, I think, a long time ago by the federal government. And a long time ago, meaning,
yes,
I'm going to guess back in the 70s and 60s, right? Right around the time of the Fair Housing Act. So when we talk about affordable housing, it goes back to Rico's point where he started throwing out AMIs and all this, and you're like, what is that? And that is a chart that is developed off of federal rules on the percentage of the area median income. And when you live in a high-cost city like Seattle, if you're a senior, your where you sit on this income chart has fallen over time. And the reason why I know this is when I started doing income work for seniors wanting to move into units in Chinatown that were government regulated, they were at 20% of this chart. But as we've had a growth in certain industries here, and certain people's incomes have gone up, senior citizens are on a fixed income. And so their income does not keep up with that. You know, you hear about these jobs at certain companies, and they're like, and I am shocked and amazed and a little horrified. But seniors kind of go up at a slower trajectory because if you're on Social Security, your income goes up at a much different scale. So a senior citizen now that I would do an income certification for is
Porque
making
para una
maybe
persona mayor
12%
ahora tenemos
of
una
area median
certificación de
income.
ingresos
That's
que
the
está
growth,
haciendo
because
tal vez
the seniors that I
el
would see in Chinatown were on social, what is it, SSI, right? Supplemental Security Income. So senior citizens' incomes do not keep up. So I think the question is, who is it available to? Affordable housing is available to almost anyone, but you have to income qualify. Now, for seniors, oftentimes they think that they would not qualify for affordable housing. And actually, for a lot of seniors, you do, because for a lot of seniors, your earned income from jobs, as you tend to retire, kind of drop off. You may have assets, and the income that you earn from assets is not as high as it was when you were working. at the 9 to 5 job. So, and it gets very technical, but basically what happens is that seniors oftentimes, I remember talking with my father-in-law who's 96, and I was like, "No, you might qualify." And he was a little taken aback by that because he had seen himself very much as a hardworking individual for his entirety of life here in Seattle. But when we started talking about it, "No, Bill, you don't make as much as you did when you were raising the family and all this. You might not be making as much money." And when we were talking about it, when I pulled up this income chart, he's like, "Oh, I am low income," and it was a little surprising for him. So I don't know, Kate, if that answers that question. Is it available to? It's available to everyone. It depends on your income. Certain places, like the Mount Zion housing that I just mentioned earlier, is specifically for seniors. Senior housing is for 62 and older, or sometimes 55. But seniors can also live in just general housing, affordable housing throughout the city. And I hope I didn't go too wonky in that. Yeah.
No, that's great. 30% of your income going to your rent, and then looking at those area median incomes in terms of how affordable housing is defined. Let's go on to, we have a lot of questions in the chat, so we're going to go ahead. Generally speaking, there is a bit of a battle when it comes to fair housing access. And I think many of you kind of spoke to this in your openings, but I'll come to you, Miss Edna, in terms of what are some of the biggest battles to fair housing access, as you were talking about, aging in the city. Tell us, these have to be kind of rapid round questions, you guys, just because we're running out of time. Yeah. But just try to tell us quickly some of the battles that you see.
Okay, I just want to finish what they were talking about in terms of affordable. Affordable to me is if I wanted to live in the, of course I live here now, thank goodness, it was 2001 and I bought a condo. To rent an apartment here in the Seattle area, where it's convenient for us, catching the bus, transportation, is really nice to live in the central area. Most of us could not afford to live in the central area because we're talking about affordable. It's affordable only if you have that income, and they go over that, and they only have a certain amount of affordable apartments in the newer buildings, the new apartments. So it's only a few, and anyone can qualify for that if you have the income. And in this area, which is what the area median income, I mean, these people make a lot of money here who live in the central area now. So for a senior, and I have a grandson who live at the Jackson Apartments here, and he's knocking $1,500 a month, and that doesn't include all of the amenities like the parking. And so to me, that's quite a bit because you pay your utilities and other things. So I did have a senior friend who wanted to live there, and she wasn't qualified because, and she's a retired teacher, of course, but what I'm saying is we can't afford to live in the central area, which is a gorgeous area now. It's, like I said, change is going to come, and I see the young people. Joaquin, I just admire you for that, and I like the way I think I know your father, Omari, but I cannot afford, and my friends cannot afford to live here, but it's so convenient for us. We can't drive anymore. We don't see that well. We're not getting around that much. The affordable ones are way out in the south end, way out. And we want to be a part of the community. And as you relocate us and where we can go for affordable, it's so far out. And so we miss so much of where we grew up or where we want to be. It depends on where you live and the income. That's all I can say, because and like I said before, our income cuts off the moment we retire. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to increase unless we're in a position where we could do jobs, jobs for seniors that's over 65 and make a little more income. But that's what I'm going to say. It depends on, like you said, you can't live where you want to live. You have to live where it's affordable for you to live. And usually it's way out. I definitely could not afford to live in Seattle at this age now and rent or buy.
There we go. Those are great points. Thank you so much, Ms. Edna. It also really answers that question too about fair housing as well. I have a question I want to pose to Rico and White King, so we can kind of get the city perspective and then kind of a community perspective here, because Seattle has a history of racial inclusion in housing, like redlining, racial covenants, and zoning that has restricted housing in neighborhoods and neighborhood options for those of the global majority. What can we do to repair these past harms for more racially inclusive future for all of Seattle? I'll start with you, Rico.
This is our shameful history and past related to redlining in this city is one of the things that we're trying to take on in this comprehensive plan major update. And I think, without putting too fine a point on it, if we look at the equitable development initiative that we have in place right now, one of the things that we're trying to talk about is what does EDI 2.0 look like, where we can do more in terms of our investments in community, but then at the same time try to, if we know that the Central District was 75% BIPOC community 20 years ago and it's 20% today, we have displaced a large percentage of our people of color out of the city. And so there's two different questions there. How through, the planning work, but then also through financial investments, and then also through how we support the leadership White King, like that Africatown provides in terms of Black-led and BIPOC-led development opportunities. How do we remove barriers so that community can do more of that work? And then how do we provide, because financing and access to capital is a huge piece of that equation. How do we try to help provide partnerships? Some of it's philanthropy, some of it's the grant work that the city does, to get more money to the BIPOC development community, which is growing. I mean, I am. It is slow, but it is growing. With the last thing I'll say is with the comp plan work, we're looking at racial and social equity, economic opportunity and security, and community as core values. Environmental stewardship is the fourth. But if that is the framing as we look at all the parts and pieces, then what we know is there were policies put in place, land use policies put in place specifically to exclude BIPOC families from being able to invest. And so what we are doing now is to try to undo those policies and put policies in place that allow for greater investment in our communities of culture and of need.
Absolutely. White King, I know that Africatown does a lot of this work. Can you help us understand some of the community perspectives around how we repair these harms?
Sure, and I'll try to be quick. Just, wherever there's been, systemic exclusion, there should be, the only way you can balance that out is with systemic inclusion, the design on both ways, right? We know there's a long history. You have House Bill 1918. I mean, the history is there. It's all over this country that's happened. Also, where there's been specific harm and damage to a specific community, there needs to be a specific remedy, to that community and those people, right? Not just a general broad stroke of, whoever is available, or need to help. So you got to be specific to name, that this particular solution is for this specific problem. One of the things that we saw with affirmative action, which was supposed to be somewhat of a reparative or reparations policy for the maldistribution of wealth from Black people for over 300 years that built the country, was that the same group that was, supposed to benefit from this probably benefited from the least, and those that were supposed to be who previously benefited from the maldistribution, those same families via their women, the daughters and the sisters and the wives, which led the money back into the same families, benefited the most from it, right? So we have to be intentional, not about just the design, but the actual implementation to the outcome of the policy. Right.
Looks like we're having some, maybe having a connection issue. So I wanted to just real quickly take this opportunity to direct folks' attention if you join us on WebEx, we do have a satisfaction feedback survey. I'm going to go ahead and get that started. So as you're listening to the rest of the panel here today, please do let us know what you thought about it. And we'll also share a link to it if you want to take it later. Thank you all.
Trina, can I?
Thanks so much, Lenny.
Trina,
Yeah. I was just about to come to you,
Okay.
Michael, with
Okay. Well, I just
one
wanted to.
question.
Okay, you asked the question, and I'll try to wrap up everything that I was going to say really quickly. I was going to say, in touching on Rico's point and White King's point, there's a city community preference policy that's relatively new, and if it was, the Fair Housing Act does not allow us to make housing preferences based on race, because race is a protected class. So the language, what the city was trying to propose was allowing people that had been harmed by governmental action in some way, whether it's by redlining or primarily redlining in this case, was really to try to allow people that have been harmed by governmental action to be able to come back to the communities that they want to come back to, right? And it doesn't have to be that I was directly harmed. It could have been my father or my grandmother, some sort of generational thing. And we had to be careful because it kind of flew in the face on surface against the Fair Housing Act. And that's why we're like, no, it's not about race. It has to do with how you were harmed by government. So there are several developers in the central area, or several that in the central area that are choosing, and other areas of the city that are choosing to look at this policy. It's the community preference policy, and it does not explicitly allow for the prioritization or preference of any race or ethnic group. It doesn't allow for that, but the goal is to increase options and address past and current displacement. The other thing that I would say on the community side is that these big governmental things like the Fair Housing Act is a pretty blunt instrument. And a few years back, remember it was established and supposed to be set up so people have the opportunity and the option to move out of communities. We were starting to see on the community side how the language, how it could be harmful to certain communities like Chinatown, where it might have been hard for us to develop housing in that community because we were not providing opportunities outside of the neighborhood for people to move. But sometimes we want to live in the communities that reflect our culture and our heritage because that is where we're most comfortable. And that's why Rico's work is really, really important, and it can talk about opportunity areas. So that's one of the dangerous things. That's one of the maybe one of the negative outcomes of the Fair Housing Act, and we have to always kind of like be mindful of, if this was set up for this, how is it playing out 50 years later? Sometimes it's good, other times not so good. And we have to take those opportunities to tweak it when it doesn't work right.
Absolutely. And sorry, White King, go ahead if you wanted to just finish up your point. I know
I just wanted to wrap up the point. Sorry about that, but I think one of the questions we ask is just very simple, and this is to Seattle. Are there Black people in the future of Seattle? That is a very real question. Based on the current trajectory, I don't know. And then what kind of life do they live? Who are they? Are they homeowners? Are they all relegated to subsidized, housing with minimal assets, or generational wealth building opportunities? I think, how cities work, like corporations or businesses, they make choices about, who the so-called customer is, right? And who they want to attract, whether it's in the form of corporations and businesses or, you know, the type of workers, and then begin to implement policies, you know, create amenities or, you know, affording, you know, certain things that will attract, right? And so there's projections, you know, that say, you know, this amount of people are coming to Seattle every year. You know, by this year will be this amount. You know, well, what percentage of those are Black people? You know, and then what about those that are already here? Our legacy, you know, property owners and homeowners that are being pressured out of the community. What specifically is being put in place and then tracked by, you know, key performance indicators, right? What are the numbers that, you know, it feels good when we have a groundbreaking, right, or a ribbon cutting, you know, but that may be sparse in comparison to the overall policy, the overall trends, right, that the numbers say. And so we have to look at the numbers, I think, set goals, and have real strategies to reach those goals in terms of what kind of city is it going to be. Is this going to be, I think it was like the 5th or 4th whitest city. Is it going to become the 2nd whitest city, you know, and are people okay with that, right? And so I think, you know, there has to be, you know, really looking in the mirror and looking at the future and maybe reverse engineering, you know, back to say, how do we get to this place where we want to be? Because the place we are now, someone designed a way to be here today, right? You know, and maybe there's unintended consequences. Maybe there were intended consequences to displace the Black community, but and other communities as well. But I think that's what has to happen. So we're looking at a clear picture, and we can know if we're on track or if we're on track and course correct as necessary along the way. And there are tools that have been proven, like the Equitable Development Initiative, which many communities worked alongside each other to bring into existence, but do need to be scaled up. So among other solutions, particularly around home ownership and legacy property owners having the opportunity to develop their property and stay as well. Thank you.
100% concur, White King.
Yeah. Such great information from all of the panelists. Just thank you all, Miss Edna, Mr. Rico, Miss Maeko, Sir White King. This is just beautiful that you guys all brought your full selves to this. And I know we had so many questions curated, and there were so many in the chat. So maybe we can work with your team, Lenny, to figure out how we can get some of that information out to the audience members, because I think some folks had some really great questions here in the chat that we just weren't able to get to for sake of time. But I appreciate everybody for joining us today. I'll let you take it away, Lenny. Thanks so much, you all.
Thank you so much. And, you know, I wanted to say, you know, if panelists can stay, we can certainly keep going. Not an expectation, though. I understand that we're scheduled till noon. So thank you to everyone. You know, some of you I haven't met in person yet. I look forward to it. And please take care, y'all. Thank you for being here. One way, Triana, thank you so much for moderating. One way, and for acknowledging the questions that we didn't get to. One way we've handled it in the past is that this is going to be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel, which is just Aging King County on YouTube. If you're watching us not on YouTube at the moment, please go ahead and subscribe to our channel. We are going to paste those questions under the comments or under the video in the comments, and then ask the panelists to please respond as appropriate. Thank you again to the panel. I want to go ahead and wrap this up at this point, and maybe one of the moderators can give a link there. Enrico, you have something to add?
Yeah. So thank you, Lenny, and Triana. Thank you for your framing of our discussion today, and it's always really lovely to be in a space with you. What I wanted to add, I put into the chat a little bit earlier a link to the One Seattle plan regarding the planning efforts that we are going to be seeing forward as a city for what the future of the city looks like, and having community voice in that conversation is critical. So please check it out, and come, you know, you can email my office, you can reach out to me, you can get information off the site, which will grow over the coming months. We are specifically in that plan to be addressing racial inequities, past and current, displacement pressures, housing costs, investments to meet existing and future community needs, as well as recovery from a global pandemic, all of these things. So we have a lot of work to do.
Thank you, Rico. Thank you, Michael. I saw your message that you have to get going. Thank you, Viking, and Miss Edna. Good to see you again. I know you're the one person I know in person. So good to see you again, and Triana, a wonderful moderating. I wanted to just wrap it up, and actually, it's kind of ironic that Michael left, because I am joining Michael's team. You know, not figuratively. I am already in the Office of Housing for a temporary assignment till the end of the year. I will be working as an administrator of the MFT, which is a multifamily tax exemption program, which is, you know, one of the ways affordable housing is supposed to happen in the city. So, you know, I won't be far away. I just won't be with Human Services. So this is kind of a, you know, kind of a mic drop moment for me in a way, until the end of the year at least. So I just wanted to, again, thank you for helping us celebrate Fair Housing Month that kicks off tomorrow. And then in May, Older American Month starts, and we'll probably have some events coming to you if you're not already on our list. You know, if you're filling out the survey, there is a place where you can, you know, add your email, and we'll be happy to let you know what's happening. And Age Friendly Seattle has been around for 5 years. We're working on a 5-year report, so that's coming your way as well. Thank you all again for being here. And at this time, I'm just going to say goodbye to everybody. We'll stop our Facebook stream. And panelists, please stick around for the Green Room networking session. Thank you. And for now, до свидания, друзья.